Some silences echo louder than 1,000 words. You know that feeling, don't you? A glance that seems ordinary, but lingers just a moment too long. A polite greeting, but the voice carries a warmth. A slowness that feels out of place. Tiny signals, meaningless on their own. But when pieced together, they paint a picture that makes you stop and wonder, is something changing here? That man is married. He has a wife, a family, a life that appears solid and settled. But then you notice, the way he looks at you is not the same as how he looks at others. It's not blatant desire. It feels more like a whisper, a silent call, an invisible search. We often think betrayal begins with a wrong decision, but the truth is, it usually starts with an empty space. That space forms after years of routine, when passion becomes duty, and duty cools into lifeless repetition. He didn't walk out the door looking for another woman, but as loneliness slowly creeps in, he starts to see in you something he has lost at home. And the frightening truth is this: most things don't start with noise. They don't explode right away. They begin like water seeping through a crack in stone, slowly, patiently, almost invisibly. One day, you notice that when he talks to you, his eyes light up just a little. He listens more carefully, as if every word you say holds special meaning. He smiles longer, holds his gaze longer, and in that moment, something passes between you. A strange feeling that makes you feel noticed, and yet unsettled. Every woman has intuition, and sometimes that intuition is sharper than any explanation. It doesn't speak through logic, but through a sensation in your chest, a soft yet unmistakable tremor. You sense something is off, but you have no proof. You feel it, but you're not sure. And from that uncertainty, a series of questions begin to rise. Am I imagining this? Am I overreacting? Or is something really taking shape here? When a married man begins to notice another woman, it is rarely driven by instant lust. It often begins with a lack of recognition, a lack of connection, a lack of space where he feels seen, heard, and allowed to be his most vulnerable self. And you, whether by chance or by choice, become the mirror reflecting that emptiness. He no longer hears compliments at home, but he sees them in your smile. He no longer feels listened to, but finds himself valued when you pay attention to his stories. He no longer feels excitement in his relationship, but rediscovers it in the few words you exchange. This shift is subtle, like a quiet melody rising within a long silence. At first, you may ignore it, but then it repeats, and the sound becomes so familiar that you can no longer pretend not to hear it. The danger is, no one begins with the intention to betray. It's not a plan. It's a slow drift, a path that starts vague, but becomes clearer with each step. And even before anything happens, both people begin to feel the pull of something invisible. There is a moment that stays with you. On an ordinary day, between mundane tasks, your eyes meet his by accident. Just a fleeting second, yet time seems to pause. In that glance, there is something deeper than words. Not exposed desire, but a longing for connection, for a feeling that has been lost. You catch a glimpse of someone drowning in monotony. And you, somehow, are the small spark of light in his darkness. You know this is dangerous. A part of you wants to walk away, but another part is curious, drawn to something you can't quite resist. Because the truth is, we all want to be seen, to be noticed, to be made to feel special. And when that comes from someone who should not be giving it to you, it creates a strange and powerful pull. In his book Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And many couples live in that resistance, denying that the flame has faded, that the connection is wearing thin. They stay silent, continue the performance, until the emptiness finds someone else to fill it. You didn't seek out that gaze, but it found you. You didn't start that conversation, but it found a way to begin. And now, you are standing at the threshold of a story you never meant to be part of. In that moment, the truth becomes clear. What is happening is not random. It is a sign, a faint signal, but one that carries weight, a whisper in the dark, marking the start of a path that could lead to places you never expected. The question is no longer, is this happening? The real question is, what will I do now that it is? And then, things did not stop at fleeting glances. It began to spread into other moments, small but unforgettable. A seemingly harmless comment, an accidental smile, a silence that felt just a bit too charged. All of it slowly started to come together, as if an invisible hand was planting a seed in the space between the two of you. At first, you didn't want to believe it. You told yourself it was just politeness, just your own oversensitivity. But then, your intuition, which rarely fails, gently pulled you back and whispered, "No, something is different. This is not just an ordinary moment." He didn't plan for this. No man walks out of his house in the morning thinking, "Today I'll seek a new connection outside my marriage." Things unfold far more quietly than that. It starts with emptiness, a long stretch of emptiness where passion has turned into habit, where habit becomes duty, and duty, over time, hardens into a hollow shell that hides the cold within. In that emptiness, even the faintest light can feel radiant, and you, whether by accident or intention, became that light. A simple conversation at work, a question he could have answered on his own, but chose to ask you instead. A trivial story, yet he shared it with you as if it was the only moment in the day where he truly felt heard. You responded with natural attentiveness, and in that moment, something stirred inside him, a feeling he hadn't known in a long time. "I feel seen." From there, the seed began to take root. He didn't say anything inappropriate. Neither did you. But every small detail became like drops of water falling onto dry soil. The first drop didn't change anything. Neither did the second. But before you knew it, a tender green sprout had emerged, fragile, yet full of life. And the most dangerous part was this: it all looked harmless. A smile, after all, can be shared with anyone. A polite question can be asked by anyone. But when these things begin to repeat with the same person, with the same emotional tone, you begin to notice something different. You hear that his voice is warmer when he speaks to you than when he speaks to others. You notice that his gaze lingers just a little longer when it meets yours. You feel a quiet intimacy, one that no one else seems to recognize. Only you and him. That is the most dangerous feeling of all. The feeling of a secret shared between just two people. In the days that follow, you catch yourself waiting for a word, a look, a random appearance in the hallway. You realize your mood starts to shift with him. A smile from him brightens your day. A careless indifference from him weighs you down. You scold yourself, "Don't overthink this." But the truth is, you're already drawn in. So is he. He no longer feels content when your conversations end too quickly. He finds ways to extend them. Another question, a light tease, a lingering smile. He doesn't realize it yet, but he's also watering that seed. One day, in the middle of casual conversation, he suddenly tells you about a personal memory. Nothing too deep, nothing too private, but enough to make you pause and wonder, why did he choose to tell me this? And in that moment, you understand that the lines have started to blur. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In this moment, both of you are standing in that space, where vague emotions shape small actions, while neither of you has put it into words. And like a reflex, you begin to protect yourself through denial. "No, I'm just imagining it. He's just being polite." But that very denial proves that you felt something, because if it meant nothing, there would be no need to explain it away. There's something curious about how emotional seeds are planted. They rarely come from grand gestures. They almost never begin with bold confessions or obvious actions. Instead, they're sown through details so small that no one notices them, except those involved. And because they are so small, they are the hardest to define, the hardest to control. You can deny a kiss. You can reject a line crossed. But how do you resist a gaze? How do you stop your heart from fluttering when you hear his name in a casual conversation? The seed has been planted, and like all seeds, it will grow, whether you want it to or not. In the days that follow, you find yourself thinking about him in unexpected moments. While driving home, while making dinner, while getting ready for bed, he appears in your mind without pattern or reason. And the most telling part is this: you don't push him out, you let him stay. You might call it curiosity. You might call it confusion. But deep down, you know what it really is: presence. A presence that is slowly growing inside you. And as for him, even though he hasn't said it, he is beginning to change too. He replies to your messages faster. He finds reasons to talk to you, even when there's nothing important to say. He starts sharing little parts of his day, not because they matter, but because he wants you to be the one who hears them. And in those seemingly harmless stories, a quiet intimacy begins to take shape. You don't know what to call it. Neither does he. But both of you know that something has begun. A seed has sprouted. A path has opened. A path that, if left unchecked, could lead to places filled with risk and contradiction. Because feelings, once rooted, rarely stay still. They grow day by day until you can no longer pretend they don't exist. Once a seed has taken root, it doesn't stay still. It reaches upward, and the first signs often appear in language. You begin to notice that his voice is no longer quite the same. The words are familiar, the usual greetings and polite questions, yet something has shifted. His tone slows, becomes warmer, as if wrapped in a layer of gentleness. He uses the same vocabulary, but you hear something entirely different. One day, you walk into the room, and he smiles and says, "You look bright today." A simple compliment, nothing inappropriate. But the way he pauses after saying it, the way his eyes linger, the fragile silence after his laugh, it all creates a different kind of atmosphere. Your heart beats a little faster, and you tell yourself, it's just a compliment. But deep down, you know it isn't just a compliment. The difference isn't in the words, but in the emotional frequency hidden within them. A simple good morning from him carries a unique tone. It feels softer, more deliberate, as if those words were chosen just for you and no one else. And then you begin to realize you've developed a private language with him. Little jokes, subtle remarks only the two of you understand. Nicknames that slip out without warning, seemingly harmless, yet they make you smile when you think about them. It's like a hidden code, a quiet cipher that only exists within the space you share. And it's that feeling, that secret belonging to just the two of you, that makes the connection grow even stronger. At times, you notice he chooses his words more carefully when he speaks to you. He adds a hint of humor, a spark of playfulness, as if wanting to leave a mark in your mind. Sometimes he speaks more softly, more slowly, as though trying to make sure his words land deep within you. And you, without realizing, begin to respond. You laugh more. Your tone becomes gentler, more intimate. This is how the seed grows, through words that seem harmless but are filled with energy. Carl Jung once wrote that in every relationship, we project the parts of ourselves we've suppressed onto others. Maybe he doesn't fully see you. Not entirely. What he sees is a reflection of what he's lost in his marriage. Attention, admiration, affirmation. And language becomes the tool he uses to reconnect with that missing piece of himself. That's why his compliments sound different when they're for you. When he says, "That color suits you," his voice slows down, his eyes light up, and you feel those words land in your heart. It's not like when he compliments a coworker's work. It's different, very different. And you notice something else, how he waits for your reaction. After speaking, he pauses, watching you, searching for a sign. A smile, a glance, a spark that says you're tuned into the same frequency. This is where the danger lies. Language, once it becomes intimate, creates a tiny universe shared by only two people, like two co-authors secretly writing a journal in ordinary words. And that journal thickens, day by day. You start to remember the little things he says. A morning joke that still makes you smile in the afternoon. A passing compliment that echoes in your heart all day. You store them like fragments of memory, even though they're nothing extraordinary. And in the quiet of night, as you lie down and close your eyes, sometimes you hear his voice in your mind. That voice with its specific cadence, like a soft melody that keeps playing long after the music stops. He's changed too. You see him putting more energy into your conversations. His voice is brighter, more personal. He starts creating moments for just the two of you. A short message, an unnecessary question, a check-in just to say hello. Gradually, this language becomes a bridge, leading both of you into a shared emotional space. People often think attraction begins with a look or a touch, but the truth is, many times, it begins with the ear, with how someone speaks to you, with the tone in their voice, with words that seem meaningless yet echo in your heart. And once language has changed, you know everything else will follow. You begin asking yourself, does he talk to me differently than he talks to others? Why do I feel this tenderness in his voice? Is this all just in my head? But the answer, even if you try to deny it, is there. There is a difference. Language is a door. And once that door opens, even slightly, both of you have stepped into another world. A world of hidden intimacy. A world that, once entered, is hard to walk away from unchanged. And what's even more concerning is this. You start to look forward to it. You wait for a message, a compliment, a playful comment. You wait to hear his voice during your day. And when he doesn't appear, you feel a strange emptiness. That is the sign the seed has rooted deeper than you thought. Language, once transformed, is no longer just speech. It becomes a current, carrying emotions, anticipation, and sometimes danger. And you know now, from here, things are only going to go further. Once language begins to change, what follows tends to unfold naturally. Because language, when it carries enough warmth, becomes a bridge to intimacy. And that bridge, once built, rarely stops at the first few steps. You begin to notice he reaches out to you more often. At first, it's just short messages, a quick reminder about work, a question that seems random. But soon, they become more frequent, with increasingly fragile reasons. A question he could easily answer on his own. A photo sent without expecting a response. A message just checking in, without really saying anything. At first, you hesitate, but gradually, you grow used to his presence. His messages become a steady rhythm in your day. You begin to wait for them, and when your phone buzzes, your heart skips just a little. This is the moment the lines start to blur. He no longer talks only about surface-level things. Instead, he begins to share his exhaustion, his frustrations at work, and slowly, he brings up his marriage. One day, he sighs and says, "Lately, it feels like no one at home really listens to me." You listen, you say nothing, but that silence becomes the space he needs to keep talking. And then he shares more, about an argument, about feeling invisible in his own home. You know you're entering dangerous territory, but at the same time, you feel needed. Something inside you resonates with his loneliness, and sometimes, you catch yourself reflecting your own emptiness through the stories he tells. From this point on, intimacy isn't formed through touch, but through confession. He begins to trust you with things he doesn't say at home. You become his secret box, the place where he stores the thoughts he can't put into words anywhere else. And when he says, "I've never told anyone this before," you feel something shift. You know that in his eyes, you're no longer just like everyone else. Emotional intimacy holds a dangerous kind of power. It's not loud, not rushed, but it runs deep. It makes two people feel closer than ever, even without a single touch. You start responding with gentle encouragement, with quiet empathy. You want him to know he's not alone. And in doing so, an invisible thread begins to tie the two of you together. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no greater illusion than believing we can separate emotion from thought." And that is what's happening here. Though nothing physical has occurred, every word he sends, every truth you hear, begins to take up space in your mind. You start thinking about him more than you're willing to admit. Not just when he texts you, but when he doesn't. You begin to wonder, what is he doing now? Is he thinking about me too? And he feels it too. He reaches out to you not just to share, but to find comfort. He sends a message when he feels drained, just to hear you say something simple like, "You'll be okay." And those few words, though brief, make him feel like he's not alone. And so, without a touch, without an embrace, without a kiss, you both have entered a deep intimacy. One more dangerous than physical connection, because it reaches the most vulnerable part of all, the heart. Some nights, he texts you later than usual. Just a few simple words, "Can't sleep." And even though you're tired, you pick up the phone and reply. You feel attached to his loneliness, as if it's your responsibility to soothe it. And somewhere along the way, you became his refuge. The hard part about emotional intimacy is that there's no clear boundary. There's no exact moment you can point to and say, "That was when we crossed the line." It's like a thick fog that slowly spreads and wraps around everything. You only realize you're lost when the path behind you disappears. You find yourself smiling at his messages, even when you're in the middle of something else. Your heart feels warmer when he shares even the smallest part of his day. And, slowly, you begin saving a portion of your emotional energy just for him. You don't talk about this with anyone. This is your secret. And that secret, like a small flame, gives you warmth, but also fear, because you know You've stepped into a place that's hard to return from. Emotional intimacy has a sweet kind of pull. It makes you believe that this is pure, that this is simply connection, simply understanding. But buried within it is a great risk. You are slowly taking the place of someone else. His wife, you become the one he turns to for understanding. You become the one he seeks for comfort. You become the mirror reflecting all the things he craves but no longer receives in his marriage. And that means this: you've become important to him, but not in the way you deserve. Because he doesn't come to you from a place of freedom. He comes from a place of lack. He didn't find you in a wide open space. He found you in a gap that hasn't yet been filled. And you, if you don't recognize this soon, will slowly become the one carrying the weight of all that emptiness. Once emotional intimacy has taken root, it rarely stays within the bounds of everyday conversation. Because the nature of connection is this: it always wants to go deeper, to reach into places never touched before. You begin to notice it when he no longer talks just about stress at work or silence in his marriage. One late evening, just when the conversation seems to end, he suddenly texts, "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible, like life is passing by and no one really sees me." You pause. That message is unlike any he has ever sent. Heavier, more raw, and in that moment, you realize he has opened a different door, one that leads into his inner world, and by responding, you step through that door with him. From that day on, your conversations deepen. He tells you about his childhood, about fears he's kept hidden. He admits that sometimes he wakes up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, asking himself, "Am I really living or just existing?" You listen, and strangely, his words touch something in your own heart. Because who hasn't, at some point, felt invisible? Who hasn't wondered whether they're truly living or just going through the motions? In that moment, empathy becomes a key. It locks the two of you into a space where both feel deeply understood. He starts saying things you've never heard from anyone before. Things like, "I've never said this to anyone else," or, "With you, I feel like I can just be myself." You know these words are dangerous, and yet they make your heart stir. Because deep down, who doesn't want to be someone's only one? Carl Jung once wrote, "We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are." He may not be seeing the full you. What he sees is the image of a woman who listens, who understands, something he longs for but is lost in his marriage. And you may not be seeing him clearly either. You see in him a mirror reflecting your own loneliness. This connection is, therefore, both real and imagined, both sweet and dangerous. Day by day, you become the one he confides in. He tells you that sometimes he feels out of place in his own family. He admits he no longer feels loved. One time, he quietly says, "Sometimes I wish things were different, but I don't even know where to begin." You listen, and your heart softens. You see him like a child left behind, longing for an embrace, for someone to say it's going to be okay. And in that moment of wanting to protect him, you unknowingly take on a role that doesn't belong to you. He no longer sees you as just a coworker or friend. You become his refuge, his emotional home, the place he no longer finds where he used to live. And when he says, "With you, I feel safer than anywhere else," you know the line has been crossed. This intimacy is sweet, but it's like honey dripping on a blade. You know it might cut you, but you still can't resist the taste. One night, he tells you a childhood memory, a time he was harshly scolded by his father and felt utterly helpless. He says that from that day forward, he learned to hide his emotions, to never let anyone see his weakness. And then he ends with, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." You say nothing. But in that silence, you know he has given you a piece of himself, a piece he doesn't give to anyone else. And in that moment, an invisible string pulls tighter around your heart. This sharing of secrets is one of the clearest signs of emotional intimacy. It's not just conversation. It's a kind of surrender. When a married man begins giving you parts of his soul that his wife no longer sees, it means you have entered the space of replacement. You're no longer an outsider. You are now part of the story, a story filled with contradictions. You find yourself caring about his mood more than you should. When he's silent, you worry. When he's sad, you want to lift him up. Your heart attaches itself to his highs and lows, even though your mind reminds you this is not your place to carry. The truth is this: you have become special, but not in the way you deserve. You've been chosen, but not fully. You've been trusted, but within a trust, tinted by absence and lack. And that is the paradox of deep emotional intimacy. It lifts you up and pulls you down at the same time. On one hand, you feel important. You are the only one he shares his deepest pain with. But on the other hand, you know that your importance only exists in his emptiness, a space that was never meant for you to fill. And if you look closely, you'll see this. He didn't find you through freedom. He found you through lack. He didn't come to love. He came to fill a void. This leads you to a difficult question. Am I really being chosen, or am I just filling in the space he doesn't have? Because emotional intimacy, when it goes too far, turns into dependency. He leans on you to feel alive, to feel worthy, and you, once just a listener, become the one carrying the weight of his loneliness. This is the moment you must wake up. Because each secret he shares is not just a confession, it's another string binding you to him. And once there are enough of them, they become a net, one that's hard to escape. You must ask yourself, am I here to listen or to carry? Am I here for both of our freedom, or am I just a place for him to hide? Because the deeper the secret, the stronger the tie. And once you've come this far, turning back is no longer easy. When a man begins to share his secrets, words alone are no longer enough. Because language, once it has built intimacy, inevitably seeks proof. And the first, clearest form of proof is time. You begin to notice it not through what he says, but through what he does. He starts showing up in more moments than you expected. A conversation that should last a few minutes, he stretches into 10. A meeting he doesn't need to attend, he finds a reason to join. An event he could leave early, he lingers instead, just to walk beside you a little longer. At first, you think it's coincidence, but when those coincidences happen too often, you know they've become intentional. He starts arranging his routines to align with yours. If you often go out for coffee at 3 p.m., he suddenly appears at the same cafe around that time. If you're working late, he somehow ends up being there too, like a casual companion. And then, with a faint smile, he says, "I just happened to pass by." But deep down, both of you know, nothing about this is accidental. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." When a man changes his daily rhythm to match your presence, his heart has already made a choice, even if his words haven't yet admitted it. Time is never meaningless. People only invest it in what truly matters to them. And when he invests it in you, it means you've become the center of a part of his world, a part that should have belonged to someone else. You feel cherished, but also uneasy, because you understand these moments are not harmless. He begins to maintain his presence in your mind, a message just to ask, "Have you had dinner?" A photo of a quiet street with the caption, "This place reminded me of you." A goodnight text sent just as you're about to turn off the lights. At first glance, it all seems ordinary. But when it repeats, you realize he's trying to become a habit in your life. He wants his presence to feel natural, familiar, so that you can't go through a day without thinking of him at least once. You begin adjusting your own time in response. You reply faster. You make yourself available when he suggests. And before you know it, your rhythm has merged with his, like two melodies overlapping until they're hard to separate. But there's something else, more subtle, more dangerous. He begins seeking validation from you. One day, he asks, "Does this haircut look good on me?" Another time, he waits for your opinion on a new shirt. And, these aren't random questions. This is how he seeks affirmation. From you, not from his wife. When you compliment him, his eyes light up, his tone softens. When you stay silent, he grows quieter too, sometimes irritable. And you realize his emotions are now orbiting around you. That makes you feel important, but also uneasy. Because a married man shouldn't place his sense of self-worth in another woman's hands. But that's exactly what he's doing. And you, whether you meant to or not, have become the center of his emotional world. His presence starts to show in smaller details. A song that reminds him of your laugh. A street that brings back memories of walks together. A coffee shop he visits, simply because he believes you'd like it. You are becoming part of his inner world, naturally, but undeniably. And this presence becomes more visible each day. He offers to drive you home. He offers to help with little things, changing a light bulb, fixing your laptop, carrying a heavy bag. You know he doesn't need to do this, but he does, because it extends his presence in your life. And then, subtle jealousy appears. He never says it outright, but occasionally asks, "Who did you have dinner with?" or "Who texts you that often?" These questions come with a smile, but you hear the tension beneath the surface. He has no right to ask. But the truth is, he can't bear the thought of someone else taking the place he's quietly imagined you in. And it's here that you see the full picture. You're no longer just a colleague or a friend. You've become the center around which his presence, his time, and even his jealousy revolve. This brings you two conflicting feelings: importance and pressure. Importance because you've been chosen as the one he turns to. Pressure because you know this role doesn't belong to you. And sooner or later, it will lead to conflict. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And clearly, the reaction has begun. He's changed his habits, adjusted his rhythm to be closer to you. You've changed how you respond, paying more attention to his presence. The two of you, though still without a label, have stepped into a space where actions now speak louder than words. The truth is, time doesn't lie. People may hide their feelings in words, but they cannot hide where they choose to invest their time. And when he gives his time to you, it means his heart has placed you in a special position, even if that means betraying a part of his life. The question is no longer, does he care about me? The real question is, do I want to be in that position? Because this presence, sweet as it may be, is not entirely free. It comes from a void, from lack, from unresolved loneliness. And if you accept it, you are also accepting to be a temporary escape rather than a true choice. And that, sooner or later, will come at a cost your heart will have to pay. When a connection grows so deep that time and presence become habitual, it's only a matter of time before conflict erupts. You begin to notice it when he becomes unpredictable. One day, he is warm and attentive. Messages arrive one after another. His voice is gentle, his eyes full of warmth. But the next day, he pulls away. He's distant in his tone, avoids eye contact, and acts as if nothing ever happened, and you are left in the chaos. You ask yourself, did I do something wrong? Why was he so present yesterday, so drawn to me? And today he feels like a stranger. The truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. The shift didn't come from you. It came from him. On one hand, he craves your presence. He finds in you the understanding, the ease, the aliveness he's lost. But on the other hand, he's torn by guilt. He knows that every moment he gives to you is a moment pulled away from his family. Deep down, he knows he's walking a path that, if continued, may reach a point of no return. Carl Jung once said, "A happy life is not achieved by eliminating conflict, but by confronting it." But most men in his position don't have the courage to face the conflict, so they avoid it. And that avoidance shows up in his withdrawal, in the sudden coldness, in the days he disappears without a word. You're left with a flood of unanswered questions. Does he truly care? Or is he just using me as a temporary shelter? Is this intimacy real, or just an illusion created by the gaps in his marriage? Am I fooling myself by thinking I'm special? And the greatest pain isn't in his silence, it's in his return. Because every time he comes back, you feel the sweetness, the closeness, the connection you've longed for. Then the cycle repeats. Closeness, distance, warmth, coldness, longing, guilt. You're trapped in an emotional spiral where even you can't tell what's real and what's imagined. There are moments when it feels like he's about to confess everything. His gaze lingers too deeply. His words feel too sincere, and you think, he's ready to give it all up to be with me. But just as quickly, he pulls back, changes the subject, hides behind a laugh, as if nothing had ever happened. This contradiction doesn't just hurt you, it eats away at him too, because he's living in two worlds, the world of responsibility and the world of longing. And those two worlds clash inside him every single day. But you, standing in the middle, are the one who carries the heaviest burden. You're no longer sure what you are in his life. A friend? A refuge? A hidden love? And the more uncertain it becomes, the more you feel like you're losing control. You begin to see clearly. The truth is not in what he says, but in what he does. And that truth is this: he has never really chosen. He has never made a firm decision. He wants you, but fears you, desires you, but denies you. And you know, If this continues, your heart will shatter under the weight of all this contradiction. This is the moment the most important question arises. What will I choose for myself? You could keep waiting, keep hoping that one day he'll find the courage to face the truth and choose you. But you also know that hope is as fragile as a leaf in a storm. Or you could walk away. Not because you feel nothing, but because you know you deserve a love that is whole, not divided. A love that is not torn between guilt and desire. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't to move forward, but to step back. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough not to settle for emotional leftovers. The truth is, a man may give you time, presence, sweet words, but if he cannot give you freedom and a clear decision, then all you have is a stolen chapter from someone else's book. And you must ask yourself, do I want to be a stolen chapter or the entire story? Carl Jung once wrote, "Only what is made conscious can be transformed." And now, what you need is to look at this truth head on, bring it out of the shadows and into the light, so that you can finally choose your own path. You deserve a love that isn't hidden, a presence that isn't stolen, a relationship that doesn't rely on someone else's absence. And the final question you must answer for yourself is this: am I receiving real love or just fragments of connection? Am I building something true or merely feeding an illusion? The choice has always been in your hands. And your true power doesn't lie in being chosen by him. It lies in choosing yourself. In the end, every story must come to a close. Not because the feelings disappear, but because the truth becomes too clear to keep avoiding. You realize that what began with a glance, a smile, a passing conversation, has now become a bond that carries real weight. It brought sweetness, yes, but also pulled you into a space of conflict and quiet pain. And now, you're faced with the final question: what do I want to hold on to for myself? A blurry connection, or the freedom to love fully? There are nights you lie still in the dark, replaying every detail. The way his voice softened when he spoke to you, the light in his eyes whenever you smiled, the way he showed up just when you needed someone. These memories feel like warm water. They make you smile, but they also sting. Because deep down, you know, those moments never fully belong to you. You can't deny he touched something deep inside you. A longing to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. But you also can't deny he didn't come to you in freedom. He came from a gap, from absence, from an ache he never healed. And you know, if you continue, you will always be the one filling a void, never the one fully chosen. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." He found you because he couldn't say what mattered to the woman he married. But the truth is, if he doesn't have the courage to face his own life, then his feelings for you are not about building. They're about escaping. You begin to understand. Real love is never built from emptiness. It can only be built from freedom. And so, you make a choice. Maybe you don't say it out loud. Maybe you simply start stepping back. You respond less often. You stop waiting for those late-night texts. You no longer search for his eyes in a crowded room. You choose silence, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to walk away from something incomplete. Yes, it hurts. But within that pain, there is quiet peace. Because for the first time in months, you feel yourself reclaiming the power to choose. You start to realize you deserve a love that doesn't need to hide. A love that isn't divided, that doesn't force you into secrecy or contradiction. A love that comes from wholeness, not lack. Because true love never arrives in secret. It doesn't live in stolen moments or whispered words spoken in the dark. True love is light, and light never needs to be hidden. You look back on everything that happened, and you understand this story was not meaningless. It taught you something essential. Not every connection is meant to be pursued. Some connections come only to show you that you deserve more, to remind you that you are worthy of so much more. You pause, take a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, you feel your heart open. Not because the longing has vanished, but because you've learned how to let it pass through you without holding on. And in that stillness, you see more clearly than ever. You deserve a man who chooses you, not in secret, but in the open. You deserve love that is not divided by guilt. You deserve to be the destination, not the escape. It may take time for your heart to heal. And yes, there will be moments when you remember the sweetness. But now, you know you made the right choice. Because no moment of sweetness is worth the cost of your peace. Carl Jung once said, "Only what is made conscious can be transformed." And today, you did exactly that. You brought this connection out of the shadows, looked it in the eye, and chose to walk another path. You are no longer just the one chosen in the absence of someone else. You chose yourself. And in choosing yourself, you open the door to a different kind of love. A love that is full, complete, and never needs to hide. The final question you leave behind, for yourself and for anyone who's ever found themselves here, is this: do I want to receive a love that is whole, or just accept fragments? And the answer, you already know. And in that soft silence, you smile. Because you understand now, true love does not arrive as a stolen chapter from someone else's book. It arrives as a brand new story, written in freedom, in light, and in a choice that never needs to hide. And you are worthy of that. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.